Having some technical difficulties. Kat, if you're watching, we miss you. So we have excuse me, I'm off screen, but now I'm back. Hello. September 29th is our chili cook-off. That's our celebration event because it is the 5th Friday of the month, which is our celebrate week. And so we have a chili cook-off and some games that we'll be playing. And this is a trophy that you can win if you win. And you can win if you win. And also a gift card. So that'll be fun. Yeah. And for tonight, we, like I said, it's Reform Week, and we are talking about human trafficking. And we have a educated and wise leader. That's all right. It's all right, Chris. You can take it. Who who does a lot of work with his business Ink180 as a tattoo artist, and is familiar with the area. So we're going to learn from Chris tonight. Come on up, Chris. Also, my first tattoo from Ink180.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me tonight. Got me out of the shop a little bit early, which is always nice. But I'll give you a brief kind of intro on who I am and what I'm about. So my name's Chris Baker, 52 years old, married to my amazing wife, Lisa, for the last almost 30 years, by the grace of God only. We have 3 kids. They're 25, 21, and 18. And we grew up in Los Angeles. And when I say that in Illinois, people are like, why? Why would you leave LA and move here? That's the first question that people always ask. And my wife and I had very different home lives as kids. She grew up with Ozzy and Harriet, and I grew up with Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne. And a lot of havoc in my house as a kid. But my dad left. My parents divorced when I was 13. My dad left the country, went to England, and we left what was a pretty comfortable life. And we moved to Carson, California. And I don't know how well y'all know Carson, California, but to put it in perspective, I grew up 3 blocks south of Compton. So I was never involved in gang activity as a kid, but all my friends were. And growing up in LA, I lost 17 friends while I lived there. And the last one, kind of the reason we left LA, kind of the final, breaking the camel's back, was one of my great friends. His name was Dante. He was a gang member, and he went to jail for crimes he pled guilty to. He did his time. But when he was locked up, we'd go visit him. And right before he was getting ready to get out, he told me, he's like, yeah, man, I'm going to church. It's like, what are you talking about going to church? Like, this guy was the real deal. And he's like, well, at first they told us if we went to church, we got an extra hour of rec time. It's like, okay, I can see that. But then he got baptized. He started talking about it more and more, and you could tell a change was going on in him. Something that I had no idea. I didn't understand that at all. And he got out, and we did what we always did when one of the guys came home. We threw a party, and we were at his mom's house all day, having a good time, doing dumb guy stuff, drinking and playing dominoes. And Dante was trying to tell us all about his new life and what it meant to him. And then he wanted to leave the gang life, and he actually wanted to move out of LA, go to school, get education. We all kind of laughed it off, because we knew what he was about before. And later on in the evening, probably about 7, 8 o'clock, all the wives and girlfriends kind of took off and headed home for the night. A bunch of guys hung out later. About 11 o'clock, we were heading to the front of the house to say our goodbyes. And at 11:47 p.m., a silver Chevy Tahoe came creeping down the street with its lights cut out, and passenger window rolled down and called out Dante's old street name, and they shot him in the chest. And I was 3 feet away from him when he got hit. My best friend bled to death in my arms that night. And the cops came, paramedics came. There was nothing that could have been done. He was gone before he hit the ground. And I went home. I called my wife when we got released by the police after their investigation and everything, about 3 a.m. And I said, hey, Dante's gone. Of course, she freaked out. She met me at the front door with a garbage bag, and she said, take all that off. I was wearing khaki shorts and a white t-shirt, and I looked like the prom scene of Carrie. And we stayed up the rest of that night talking. We're like, we've talked about leaving LA. Now we're leaving LA. And my wife's family is originally from Chicagoland. She was born in Bensenville. And we met out there in high school, fell in love, got married, started our family. But we wanted a place, we're talking, where do we move? Where do we want to go? We wanted a place that had the same kind of cultural diversity and arts and music and all the things that we loved about LA without all the nonsense. So, of course, we moved to the suburbs of Chicago because nothing bad ever happens in Chicago. It's so bad now that my friends in LA who are retired gang members call me all the time like, bro, what's going on in Chicago? That's how bad it is. Because when I left LA, I told Lisa, I swear, we're never going to see anything like the madness we saw in LA in the 80s and 90s. And Chicago said, hold my beer. So we moved out here, got established. And then what Dante didn't know the day that he was telling us all about God and his new life was that he was planting seeds that would take a few years to take root in me and others. But it did when I moved out here with my family. And my whole life changed because a marriage counselor prayed for me and my wife. I experienced the Holy Spirit that day in her office. I went to church the next morning. 6 months later, I was on top of a mountain in Haiti helping them build a school. And ever since then, I've been running towards any opportunity to serve however I could. But I really started praying about it. And I was like, Lord, I was an idiot for 38 years. I ran away from you for 38 years. And I'll do whatever you want me to do for the rest of it, whatever I got left. And he said, you know what? I want you to go out and do what you love more than anything else. I want you to do it for free to help people that are trying to change their lives like Dante and others. And I prayed about it. Thought, well, I love tattooing more than anything, but enough people in churches look at me and clutch their purse a little tighter when I walk in, or they like walk around where I'm at. And I get it. I got tattoos. I started getting tattoos on my 18th birthday so people would leave me alone. Not because I was a bad person. I just didn't want to let anybody get close. Because anytime anybody got close, they either split like my dad, they went to jail or prison, or they died. So I started doing this to myself to keep people at a distance. And the ironic thing is the Lord has used it to bring people closer. So when we started Ink180, it was 2011, and solely focused on covering and removing gang tattoos. There's an example here. So this is a young man that called me up. He did 10 years in Menard prison. He got out. He found the Lord when he was locked up. I'm like, Dante, I hear you like right now. And he called me up. He said, I just got out, literally in the morning. Got out. All of our information, our business cards, our literature is in every jail and prison in the state of Illinois and some other states too. So called me up, say, cover this. And King, all about Jesus now. I'm done with that life. I'm moving away from my old neighborhood. I said, yeah, come on in. He said, you want? You cover it with whatever you want. I was like, all right. So I thought, I prayed about it, which I often do when I'm doing cover-ups. I said, well, we're going to cover the fake kings with the real king. And it just symbolized a lot of stuff for him that Jesus has his back to. And it was a totally cool opportunity. I spent 4 hours with him doing this tattoo, listening to his story and talking, praying with him, and just trying to help him out. So about 6 months into doing gang cover-ups and removals, because that's all we did at first, I did an update at my church. This guy comes running after me outside of church when I'm leaving, which is not a wise idea. I have PTSD, so I will trigger, right? But he comes up and grabs me by the shoulder and introduces himself. He's an agent with Homeland Security. He said, Chris, I love what you're doing. Will you come up and do a presentation for our gang unit? I said, heck yeah, I will. Set it up. So he did. And I got up there and there was about 50 people in the room. And he said, oh, this is so-and-so and this is what they do. And this is our human trafficking team. I was like, what's trafficking? What are you talking about, human trafficking? And I said what everybody says to me, which drives me insane. So I can only imagine what they felt. I said, "You mean like that movie Taken?" And they're like, "Oh, here we go." I did the presentation with the gang stuff. We partnered in like 10 minutes. It was the easiest sales job ever. Federal government loves free programs, right? So I looked at the commander of this trafficking team. I said, "Can you please educate me?" And I was upset because I'm somebody that likes to think that I'm pretty street smart. I always have felt that way. But I had no idea what he was talking about. They started dropping facts on me. I'll give you some of those now, but they said there's 250,000 to 300,000 Americans being trafficked in this country every day. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. I don't know if any of you saw The Sound of Freedom, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the United States is the biggest consumer and purchaser of sex in the world. They told me things like the average age that these kids get lured into it is 13 years old. Kids from all backgrounds. And I can sit here, I can tell you stories for hours. We had a case. I get the chills every time I drive down here, downtown Naperville, because 2 years ago, we helped get two brothers sentenced to 40 and 45 years in prison because they bought a foreclosed home on the other side of downtown and ran a brothel in there for 3 years. And nobody knew it, except for the 14 girls they had in that house. I asked them what tattoos have to do with trafficking. They started showing me stuff like this. These tattoos are not typically done by professionals. They're usually done by a gang member, the trafficker themselves. They're not high quality, which is great for me. You see things like gang symbols because gangs are very prevalent in the world of trafficking. For decades, they've used drug sales and gun sales as their chief way of making money. But now they've unfortunately learned they can go lure in 10 kids, put them out with a quota every day, and they just sit in the house and wait for the money to come back at night. We used to see a lot more barcode tattoos. We don't see them that much anymore. It's just a visual symbol that you're a piece of product I can buy, sell, trade, or throw you away when I want. Facial tattoos, just a way that they use tattoos to degrade or demean their victims. Get money, the dollar signs. When I was at the Super Bowl, and we'll talk about Super Bowl in a little bit too, but I was at the Super Bowl last year in Phoenix removing tattoos for trafficking survivors. And I removed a tattoo just like this off the hand of a 10-year-old girl. These are two of the very first cases that I worked on for trafficking. So this one here on the left, you see it says Cowboy Productions. Cowboy was a pimp in Chicago, and he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I was in a church plant meeting one morning, and a friend of mine from Homeland Security sends me a link to a news story in the Chicago Tribune, and it was talking about the case and how he was sentenced the day before, and that the judge told him, "I'm giving you life without the possibility of parole, not just because of the heinous crimes that you did, but because for the rest of their lives, these 17 young women are going to have to look at your name on the side of their neck every time they brush their teeth, brush their hair, look in the mirror, whatever." He sent me this. I'm reading it. I excused myself from the meeting, and I went and called. I said, "You need to get me in on this. I want to help them." And they called then State's Attorney Anita Alvarez. Anita Alvarez called me like 3 minutes later. She's like, "When can you come?" And we spent a year removing all 17 tattoos off of these girls. Some had multiple tattoos. Some were in different parts of the country. I don't just work solely out of my shop in Oswego. I travel all over the place. But that was the first 17 girls that we did. And then when I finished, I asked my friend who's a prosecutor, I said, "He's being held in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I have to go to Terre Haute, Indiana. Can I get in and meet with him in the prison?" God, why would you want to do that? I said, oh, I have a couple reasons. It made it happen. I went in. This guy was handcuffed and had ankle shackles, going anywhere. And there were 3 armed guards right behind him. And I laid out the 17 pictures from before, all the pictures that. And he said a couple things I'd never repeat, but they weren't pleasant. And then I laid out 17 after pictures to show him that those tattoos were all gone, and to show him that he doesn't have any hold on these young women anymore, and their life is starting fresh. The one here on the right says Kevin Johnson's property. I was on her lower back. Kevin Johnson is was her husband. He's in prison in Iowa now. She was a elementary school teacher in Iowa, and what nobody knew was that her and her husband were addicted to methamphetamine. So how she taught on meth, I'll never know, but she would go to work all day and teach, and then when she came home, he would force her to go out and prostitute to get the money they needed for their drugs. And it's just, these stories are the worst things that Hollywood could never dream up, you know? So this is a young woman from Springfield, Illinois. She was trafficked for 7 years and then was recovered in an operation. She was brought out of it, went to a safe house, went to a drug rehabilitation facility, because a lot of pimps and traffickers will get their victims hooked on hardcore drugs, and that's how they keep them doing it. But this tattoo, apologize for the language, but it said realist B on her hands. Realist bitch, right? And yeah, so you can imagine people, a lot of times people will say, well, what's the big deal, Chris? They got out of that life. Well, think about it. Do you want to go to the grocery store or Target or whatever with the words realist bitch on your hands for the rest of your life? Absolutely no, you don't. So she came up and I asked her, I said, well, what do you want to cover it with? And she's like, Chris, I don't care. Just black it out. I just don't want to see it. I'm like, well, I'm an artist. I want to give you something beautiful to look at. So we just had a conversation where we just started talking. I'm like, well, tell me about what you're doing now. She said, well, I started a landscape architecture business and it's going great. And I hire other survivors that have gone through the same programs, and it gives them a fresh start. So we started talking about it, and I go, well, what's your favorite kind of flower? She's like, well, roses. We'll do black and gray roses to cover that. And I sat with her for about 3 hours doing these 2 tattoos. She told me so much stuff. She dropped so many names of old buyers in Springfield, Illinois. You can imagine who most of them were. And it was amazing. It's amazing to just sit and be present with them, to listen to their story, because really all they want at that stage in their life is just to be heard and validated. We've had survivors from all different backgrounds, wealthy, middle class, very, very poor, every race, every background. I've been having a situation lately where I've been getting more and more male survivors of trafficking. And so about a month and a half ago, I had a young man come in. He's 23 years old. He was trafficked by his uncle up in Chicago, north side. And I'm sitting there and I'm covering this young man's tattoo, having a great conversation with him. And he starts to tear up. And I'm like, you okay? Do you need me to take a break? You need some water? And he's like, no. He said, I can't believe you're helping me. I said, why? It's what we do. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we exist. He goes, no, I know. He said, but I can't tell you how many Christian organizations I went to for help, and they turned me away because they said that I was gay. And then he's like, but I swear I'm not. I'm like, whoa. None of that matters to me. I'm here to help you. And I'm sorry that you face that from other organizations that called themselves Christian, because my form of Christianity is I love people where they're at. I'm here to help. That's all I'm here to do. And I learn stuff every day from these survivors. One of the things I'm learning more and more is the LGBTQ plus community is among the highest at-risk youth. And we need to do better. We need to do a lot better. Now, in our shop, we did something years ago. You know, when I started removing gang tattoos, I would take their bandanas and hang them up in the shop. And I've got tons of them up there. But I really wanted to do something for sex trafficking survivors to really give them that kind of flag in the sand moment of, thank God that old life is over. That old life is done. Our whole ministry is centered around 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, therefore, anyone who is in Christ is a new creation. The old is dead and the new has come. And that's really what it's all about. So I painted a tree on an 8-foot by 8-foot canvas with no leaves on it. And every time we do a removal or a cover up, they dip their hand in paint and they put it up to portray the leaves on the tree, and they write messages. And it's full. It's full now. And I sit there a lot of nights before I go home and I stare at it and I pray, and I can look at every one of those handprints and tell you exactly what their story was, who they were, what their dreams were. And it's a powerful thing for us and for them. Originally, it was all for them. But what I realize is it's just as much for us to reflect on. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's a struggle. Paying the bills is difficult. But it's what we've been charged by God to do. And that's why I've never had to say no. We've been blessed to be able to help over 10,000 people in almost 11 years. And people would ask me in the past, like, well, Chris, how long do you think you're going to keep doing this? And I would always say, well, until God tells me to do something else. But all I ever hear from God is an affirmation of we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and you're not quitting. I've dealt with all kinds of spiritual warfare. I almost died 3 years ago from a flesh-eating bacteria, and I'm not going anywhere. I continue to learn, and I continue to share what we do, and that's what we're blessed to be able to do. But, you know, people think of us as, oh, you're that tattoo removal guy. Yes. At my core, I'm that tattoo removal guy, okay, who just loves to love people where they're at, right? But there's a lot of other things that we do. My daughter, Mackenzie, is 25. And when she was 16, she walked over to the shop. My shop's right behind Oswego High School, where she went, and all three of my kids did. She walked over one afternoon after school, and she said, Dad, I had an idea. It's like, okay. There's something I think you should start doing with the ministry. And I go, oh, good. In my head, I'm thinking, great, I need more work to do. Keep me busy, right? And I said, well, what's your idea? She said, well, we went to an event the night before, and there was a survivor there telling us about how she was lured in, recruited, and groomed through social media. And I said, yeah, we hear that a lot. She said, well, Dad, I think you should teach a social media safety class to talk to kids and their parents about how to stay safe online. And I sat back in my chair and smiled, and I looked at my 16-year-old daughter, and I was like, Mac, I think that's a phenomenal idea. I love it. Super idea. And I think you should do that. And she started to sweat and, you know, got a little scared and didn't exactly know what to think. And she's like, Dad, you know, they're not going to listen to me. I'm only a 16-year-old girl. What do I know? I looked at her, I said, nobody knows social media better than a 16-year-old girl. And we talked more that night. And I was like, I'll tell you what, how about if we teach it together? And we've been doing that for 9 years together. And we love doing it. In fact, we're doing it Sunday up in Lake Zurich. Are you? Right on. We do a lot of victim advocate work and legislation, which is not my favorite thing to do, but it's a necessary evil. I am not a fan of politics nor politicians. We'll leave that at that. But we've been able to get some legislation passed. We were able to pass a law, House Bill 5858, we wrote, and now we're able to do tattoo removals for minors, regardless of parental consent or not, for sex trafficking tattoos and gang-related tattoos. So that was a huge thing for us. But otherwise, they had to wait till they were 18, and like, who wants to wait till they're 18, right? My daughter, Mackenzie, who I told you about, she's a hairstylist. And we wrote a bill, it's like 4 years ago, where all tattoo artists that are licensed in the state of Illinois had to go through an hour-long training on sex trafficking, domestic violence, how to spot potential victims coming into the shop. And because of that, we added a line to our waiver, and all shops have the same thing now, where it basically says, are you getting this tattoo on your own accord, or is somebody forcing you to do it? And then it also says, if someone's forcing you to get this tattoo and they're here with you, ask your artist, me, I'm the only one there, right? Is Kendall working today? Because we're in Kendall County. And we'll alert the police. We'll keep you safe until they get here. And we've used it twice. Yeah, we've used it twice. So we got that done. The training is mandatory in the state now, which is awesome. But my daughter's a hairstylist, and she said, Dad, we need this too. So I helped her write an amendment to it. So now hair salons are going to have to do that same training, because believe it or not, pimps and traffickers will bring their victims in to get their hair and nails done and all that. Gang awareness class. I love doing that. It shines a light on what parents don't see, right? I do it a lot of times. I'll do it like in Aurora. I do it a lot in the city. But just trying to teach parents, hey, if you see these kind of behaviors, your kid's kind of at risk. Street ministry work, every week, at least every week, I'm up on the south side and the west side of the city with different organizations, just trying to keep kids out of that world, whether it's sex trafficking or gangs. We speak in schools all the time. Love doing that because, when Mackenzie had the idea to start the social media class, we looked at it and we're like, man, this is cool, the work that we get to do, but man, I'd way rather keep these kids out of this chair, getting stuff removed. I'd rather educate them on the front side. So we do that. Super Bowl outreach, I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And then community education, what we're doing tonight, right? Super Bowl. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that the Super Bowl is talked about as being one of the biggest, if not the biggest, single day trafficking event in the world. And it's certainly one of them. I don't really pay too close of attention to, oh, this one's worse, this one's worse. They're all bad. If there's one kid getting trafficked, it's too many, right? But we know the Super Bowl is a big deal. I've gone to the last 7 Super Bowls. And when I say that in churches full of guys, they're like, you're so lucky. Like, bro, I'm a Bears and a Raiders fan. I don't need to go to the Super Bowl because my teams aren't in it. But what we do, we work with organizations, federal, state, and local law enforcement in whatever city it is. And we do 2 things. I go and I take all my gear and I do removals, right? This last year in Phoenix, I did 39 removals in a week. And then we also do work to help locate people who are being trafficked around the Super Bowl. And this last year in Phoenix, it was almost 400 that they recovered. And it's a huge operation. It takes 3 weeks. We don't personally get to do the cool kicking in the doors, cops type stuff. I wish I could just one time. I would love to tackle a trafficker or a buyer, but apparently God doesn't want me to do that. But we do the cool back end computer work. So we do the investigative stuff. We hack into their social media. We watch ads. It's hard. I'm going to talk about one here in a minute. It was really particularly hard for me, but we have a few tools at our disposal. There is a company called Securus. Securus's job, their function, the only thing they do, they record and archive every phone call that's made from a prison or a jail out to the community. Every phone call, they archive it. Then we have a piece of software called Spotlight. Sometimes you'll see people talk about how wonderful Ashton Kutcher is and how much work he does to fight trafficking. He funded the production or the programming of Spotlight. It's a huge, huge win for the work that we get to do. Basically, what you do is you set up a geographic perimeter, however big you want, and it goes out onto the internet, the dark web, and it pulls in every ad for sex that's out there. There's a lot. Those ads have videos, they have photos, they have descriptions, price sheets, the whole deal. And then on top of that, we have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database. So what we do is we run all three of those tools and we crash them together. We use photo recognition software, and it'll pull up possible matches between those ads and the missing posters. I'm going to show you one here in a second. Then what we do is we take a database scrape of all those recorded phone calls, every one of them, that match any of the ad phone numbers, because we have pimps and traffickers incarcerated calling their girls or boys that they're trafficking to keep their business going, which is insane to me. So a few years ago, I was in Tampa, COVID year. We were down in Tampa, and it was my third day of helping to look for missing kids. And this is a young girl here that was missing from Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we would get assigned, there was about 50 of us in this room doing this work. We would randomly get assigned a missing poster and start the background work. And when I got this one, it was my third day there. It was probably my 10th hour working. I was getting a little hangry. I was worn out. I was emotional. But then I got this poster and it stopped me dead in my tracks, because that's Amber Salas from Fort Worth, Texas. That's Quinn Baker, my daughter. When I saw that girl's face, all I saw was that girl's face. And I'm sweating right now thinking about it, but I excused myself from the boardroom we were working in. I went up to my hotel room and I FaceTimed my wife and my daughter. And I told them what was going on. I showed them the picture and we prayed, and I went back down and did the work. And about 3 hours later, I handed this packet of information to these two officers who I'd never met. And I said, guys, I need you to do me a favor. I would never ask again, but you'll understand why in a minute. When you find her, and I had this piece that they were going to find this young woman, this girl, even knowing that the most staggering statistic related to trafficking is that less than 1% of them are ever found alive. And I said to them, guys, here's my card with my cell phone number on it. And when you find her, I just need to know she's alive. And they said, no problem, Chris, we'll let you know. And they went out that night, no luck. They went out the next night and they missed her by 10 minutes. And I was just like, I felt sick the whole time. The third night they went out and they found her, and they found her and another young girl she was being trafficked with. They found their trafficker, and they found two buyers, and they arrested the men. And I only use the word men to, notate their gender. These people who buy sex are not any kind of man. They're the worst. But they texted me, and then they called me and they said, hey, we're transporting these young women to the hospital. So every year we have a hospital wing set up. It's highly secured. There's trauma counselors there. There's nurses, doctors, substance abuse counselors, safe house people, and they get evaluated and treated. And they said, listen, if you want to come and see her, you can, but you're going to be like behind glass. You're not going to have any interaction. I said, all right. And I'll tell you what, I don't know why I did it. Actually, I do. I know now why I did it, and I'll explain that in a second. But I drove over there. It was about a 15-minute drive, and I was praying to God. I was like, thank you so much for finding them, Lord, and protecting these officers and getting the perpetrators and recovering these girls. And I get to the hospital, and I look at them through the glass, and I didn't even recognize her. She was addicted to methamphetamine and heroin, and just open sores all over her very frail body, very undernourished. It was just a terrible thing to see, because in my mind, all I saw was my daughter addicted to meth and heroin. And I left and thanked the officers, and I was driving back to the hotel, and I was just praising God. I'm like, Lord, thank you for breaking that spiritual attack, because I really felt like Satan was trying to come at me to prevent me from doing what God's charged me to do. And I was mad. And I was like, thank you so much, Lord, for breaking that. And it was like, I have conversations with Jesus. People probably think I'm absolutely nuts when they drive up next to me and see me talk, like, who's he talking to? And it's like I got a message back pretty fast while I was driving. And I was told that, thankful that they're safe. Hopefully they can get what they need. But then the answer back was, that wasn't spiritual attack. It's like, great. Now Satan's using Jesus's voice in my head, right? He said, no, that was not spiritual attack. That was me. I put you on that one because thinking that was your daughter, or seeing your daughter in that young woman, was hard because Quinn's your daughter. I was like, yeah, but this doesn't make any sense. He said, well, they're all mine. So please go back and do more. So I stopped at 7-Eleven on the way back. I grabbed 3 of those 5-hour energy shots. I was like, went back to the hotel, and I worked for like 2.5 straight days, no sleep. And it's hard. It's never easy. But you know what? When I don't ever want to make it sound like Jesus sold me a fake bill of goods, because he told me it wasn't going to be easy. I said, I'll do anything you want me to do, Lord. Just tell me what it is and I'll do it. He said, there you go. And for as hard as it is hard mentally. I go to a counselor every week, and I'm a huge proponent of mental health care. I don't think men talk about it enough. I don't think the big church talks about it enough. But without that, I would not be doing what I do. I'll tell you about the 10-year-old girl in Phoenix. So I was doing removals. I'm at the FBI headquarters in Phoenix, brand new buildings, gorgeous. We're all paying for it, so that's why I told you about it. And what's supposed to happen is they have caseworkers. They all have caseworkers that are in that office. They're supposed to come in before the survivor comes in. They're supposed to kind of tell me, like, here's kind of the situation. If they have PTSD, I need to know if they have any triggers, or is it physical touch? Is it sound, loud sound? What triggers their PTSD? So I'm prepared, right? Well, I'd done the first 38 removals. Things were going good. We had a nice flow going with everybody. And then it was my last day there. And they brought this young girl in. And I didn't know how old she was. I didn't know if it was a girl, a boy. I didn't know the situation at all. Nothing. Totally blind. And this little 10-year-old girl comes walking in big baggy sweatpants and a hoodie with the string pulled real tight so you could see about that much of her face. And she sat down, and inside I'm fuming. And so I started talking to her, and there was another caseworker in the room, which is one of my requirements. And she showed me the tattoo on her hand right here. On her left, the web of her hand, right between her thumb and her first finger. It was a tiny little dollar sign, the size of a dime. I was even more angry when I saw that. And so I explained to her what I was going to do in just a real soft voice and trying to keep everything going good and everything. And she didn't say a word at all. Remove the tattoo. Thank God it was a stick and poke tattoo. It was done with just a straight needle and some India ink. So I was able to get everything out in one shot, which is awesome. Doesn't always happen that way, but a lot of times now we can do that. And she didn't say a word, didn't make a sound. The whole thing took about 15 minutes. And when it was all over, I explained to her how to take care of it and all that, gave her a sheet. And she stood up and she said, thank you. And then she walked out. The minute that door shut, I was fuming angry. I wanted to hurt people. I'm not proud to say it, but I'm transparent. And the caseworker came in, and thank God it was a woman, because I was ready to go off on somebody, and I didn't, because she got caught up with another client, and it was nobody's fault. So we talked about it. I went down to my car for a few minutes, and I made a Facebook Live video on the Ink180 Facebook. And if you go on there, it's still there. You can find it. It's from February, and you can kind of see where I was mentally in that moment. But the caseworker, after I went back in, told me the situation, told me the story, and it's terrible. Her name's Angie, 10 years old. They've been trafficked for 2 years, starting when she was 8. Her trafficker was her own mother. And the saddest thing about that statement is it's become pretty common where parents or family members are the ones doing the trafficking. Angie was trafficked by her mom and her mom's boyfriend. Her dad was in prison for, I think, 60 years for double homicide. He was a Hell's Angel. Really great family. And the mom and the mom's boyfriend were addicted to meth and heroin, and they'd been trafficking this poor girl for 2 years every day to get their drug money. And Angie woke up in a seedy motel in Flagstaff, Arizona one morning, went to wake her mom up to get breakfast because she was hungry, and mom was non-responsive. She tried to wake up mom's boyfriend, same thing, no response. So she called 911. They were both dead, overdosed. And it's been an interesting thing. I've spoken about this a handful of times since I got back from the Super Bowl. And a lot of times people get really upset when I say it, but the fact that they both overdosed and died is probably the biggest blessing in that little girl's life. And especially being someone that is so outspoken about the fact that people can change if they really want to, because I believe that, because I have. I'm a work in progress in the hands of the greatest artist of all time, but I'm astonished at how far I've come in 14 years since I started my walk. And I know that God has even more amazing things for me to see before I'm done. And I think he's going to make me live to be about 117 before I get lucky enough to go home. But this work is different. I love it. I never wanted to do normal ministry, and I would pray. I was like, God, give me something crazy. I went to Haiti 3 times. I saw some crazy stuff down there that I thought was not real. I've always heard people talk about demonic possession and stuff like that. And I was like, come on, that's like movie stuff until you go to Haiti and you see it. I've had opportunities to speak in maximum security prisons with the worst of the worst violent offenders, sexual predators, and share Jesus with them. One of my favorite disciples is Paul. Paul spent most of his life in prison. Now, while I don't want to go to prison, I don't mind going in for the day and just sharing Jesus with people. And I've seen Jesus do some incredible things with people locked up, people that are locked up for life with no chance of parole. I get an opportunity to have a front row seat every day to watch Jesus chip away at the concrete surrounding people's hearts and watch them start to change. And it has not a thing to do with me. It has everything to do with him. We tell people all the time, Jesus works on their heart and their soul. We just work on their skin, and we try to meet in the middle. We try to provide people not just with tattoo removals or cover-ups, but with options and opportunities and other organizations that we partner with to help them meet more of their needs to make their dreams a reality. And I always tell my kids, anytime, when you're laying in bed at night getting ready to go to sleep, anytime you got to help somebody that could never pay you back, it's pretty easy to go to sleep at night. And one of my biggest things and my biggest prayers for people whenever I go speak anywhere I get to speak is I don't want you guys to leave here tonight and be like, oh man, what a great story. What a cool mission. Go find your 180. We all have gifts. We all have talents. We have opportunities in front of us every single day to just love people. You don't have to preach at people. I've had atheists come to my shop for regular tattoos. I've had Satanists come to my shop for regular tattoos, and they tell me, they're like, I almost didn't come to you. I'm like, why? Like, well, you're a Christian. And I feel like getting preached at for 2 hours. I'm like, oh my gosh, should I do that? And they're like, no, that's what I'm telling you. Like, but here's the cool thing. I've had numerous folks tell me, hey man, you know, if more Christians would talk to me the way you did, I would be interested. I would be interested. And I get that feeling because growing up, I had a lot of friends, their family were Christians, you know, and it was that facade. Like, we're better than everybody else because we're Christians. Jesus loves us more than you because you don't go to church. And I'm like, bro, I don't want any part of that faith. I want true, authentic faith where you just love people where they're at. You don't judge people, because I know I don't want people judging me. And I've given people numerous reasons to judge me over the years. Believe me. We're here to help. We're here to bless people in our way. And we love it. So I just got a phone call today, which is an incredible opportunity. In November, I get to go to Nepal. And there's a safe house in Nepal, just outside of Kathmandu, that houses 60 trafficking survivors at a time. And these are little kids. And we're going to be raising money to get them a laser so I can go and teach them how to remove these tattoos, because the horrible things that happen here with tattoos and pimps and traffickers and gangs, same thing happens there. It's not a universal sin, I guess. But the Lord lets me play in some pretty interesting sandboxes, and I love it. I wake up every morning now, and I'm like, oh, man, I get to go to work today. It's not how many sick days do I have or whatever, because the Lord shows me something every single day, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing to be called, and to sit back and think about the fact that we've been able to do this for almost 11 years, help 10,000 people plus, and we've never had to charge anybody a dime for it. My last thing on that, my accountant and tax guy, he's Jewish, 68-year-old Jewish guy named Bernie. He's about this tall. He's hilarious. And he keeps track. We have to keep records of how many cover-ups we do, how many removals we do, supplies, all that stuff for taxes. And he keeps a running total, because on the spreadsheet, he's like, I want you to put in there what you would have charged to do that work. And he called me up, this is like 4 or 5 months ago. He's like, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Do you know how much free work you've given away so far? And I said, I don't know. Doesn't bother me. He goes, $1.7 million. And I'm like, don't tell me that. Because old sinful Chris doesn't want to hear that, man. Like, but no, he's an interesting guy. He's actually come and sat a couple of times when I've been covering up or removing trafficking tattoos. He's a great guy, but he loves to give me a hard time. I guess I would love to answer any questions y'all might have. Okay. Yeah, cool. All right. Cool. Thanks, guys.